Hello everybody, welcome into another lesson. Today we are going to discuss angles. So what is an angle exactly? An angle is when you could pick any of these angles I'm about to show you, because these are all different types of angles, but they are angles nonetheless. When you have what are two rays or half lines, when they come together at a single point called the vertex, at the vertex, that's where the angle is formed. And I named each of these angle X. You can name it angle A, angle B, what have you. You can name it whatever you want. But I named it X for simplicity's sake. So let's start out with our very first type of angle. If you have an angle that's greater than 0 degrees, because if you had a 0 degree angle, it'd be non-existent. You'd have nothing. But if you have an angle greater than 0 degrees, but less than 90 degrees, it's called an acute angle. And how you can remember that is, oh, it's so acute, because it's smaller than 90 degrees. So remember, smaller than 90 degrees, how acute it is. It's an acute angle. Next, you have, if an angle is equal to 90 degrees, the measure of angle X is equal to 90 degrees, it is a right angle. It forms a perfect corner when it's 90 degrees, an exact perfect corner at 90. So if it's 90 degrees, it's a right angle. If you have the measure of an angle that is greater than 90 degrees, so it's greater than 90, but it's less than 180 degrees, it's called an obtuse angle. We have an obtuse angle drawn here. You can think of it like obese, obtuse, it's big. It's greater than 90, but less than 180. In the last angle we have here, if the measure of the angle equals 180 degrees, it is a straight angle. It's a straight line. So those are your four types of angles. So now what we need to do, I'm going to teach you how to measure an angle. You may have seen this before. It is a protractor. See the little dot at the bottom? That's where you put your pen or whatever into to get yourself a dot. And then you would draw a straight line down at the bottom near the dot. And then your top ray is going to correspond to whatever measure of the angle that it is, and that's how you would form your angles. These I've already pre-drawn and formed. So in this case, this angle, sometimes you'll see an angle denoted with one of those lines, curved lines inside of it. That denotes an angle. The measure of this angle, measure of angle X, I've already worked it out on the protractor, is equal to 45 degrees. This is a 45 degree angle. I'm gonna we're gonna identify what degrees the angle are, and we're gonna label it. So this angle is a 45 degree angle. Since it's less than 90 but greater than 0, this is an example of an acute angle. This is in fact an acute angle. Now, this angle we've already determined to be 90 degrees. The measure of this angle is exactly 90 degrees. Therefore, it is a right angle, forms a perfect corner. If it were 89, it would still be an acute angle. If it were 91, it would be an obtuse angle. I suppose it wouldn't look too much different on either side, but it would technically not be a right angle till it's exactly 90. Now this angle down here, this obtuse angle, is equal to 120 degrees. I've already pre-measured it with a protractor. That's what a 120 degree angle looks like. This is an obtuse angle. It is obtuse. In the last angle I've already measured, I could draw a straight line. This angle equals 180 degrees. therefore making it a straight angle. So you got to see examples of all four types of angles. If I drew a 50-degree angle, it'd still be acute. The only one that's right is 90. If I drew a 91-degree angle or a 150-degree angle or even a 179-degree angle, it would still be obtuse. The only angle that's 180 is straight. That's the only time it can be straight. A straight angle is if it's 180. So those are the four types of angles that exist. Now, we're going to go off of 90 and 180 degree angles, and we're going to talk about two special types of angles. First, let's talk about what are called complementary angles. Complementary angles. Let's talk about those. A complementary angle is complementary angles are two angles that when you put the sum of them together, they equal 90 degrees. So let's say I want to form, I'm going to take my protractor, let's take my protractor, right? Let's draw the line to 90. So the entire thing should equal 90 degrees. Forgive my terrible drawing here, even with the straight edge, I'm not the best. Right? Okay. Let's say I have two angles. I'm going to split this into two different angles. We'll make this one a 30-degree angle. Sorry about this, guys. Okay. So let's say this angle right here is 30 degrees, right? I have a 30-degree angle. I want to make a total of 90 degrees. Well, the next angle to make this a total 90 degrees would have to be 60 degrees. So you would have complementary angles of 30 and 60. 30 and 60 are complements of each other, making a 90-degree angle. Or let's say we had, I know this isn't exact, but we had 45 degrees and 45 degrees. Clearly they're not each 45 degrees, but let's just say they are. 45 and 45 are complementary angles to each other because when you add the two together, they equal 90. Or let's say the first angle is equal to 15 degrees and the second angle is equal to 75 degrees. 75 and 15, they make 90. If the sum of the two angles add up to be 90 degrees, they are complementary angles. So, complementary angles, again, they occur when the measure of the first angle plus the measure of the second angle equal 90 degrees. Measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 90. So here we have angle 1, here we have angle 2. If you add these two together, they should equal 90. If they don't equal 90, they add up to anything else but 90. They're not complementary angles. So let's go ahead and say the measure of angle 1 equals 40 degrees, right? Let's do a little bit of a math problem here. The measure of angle 1 is 40 degrees. We don't know the measure of angle 2, but we know they're complementary angles, meaning they equal 90 degrees. Well, you're going to treat that measure of angle 2 to find the missing angle as a variable. You're going to get the measure of angle 2 by itself. In order to do that, you subtract 40 from both sides. You'll get the measure of angle 2 is equal to, what is 90 minus 40? That's 50. So the measure of angle 2 in this case would equal 50 degrees in order to make that a complementary angle. If you want to remember that complementary angles make up a right angle, you can remember it this way. It's right to complement someone. That's how I remember it. It's right to complement someone. That'll symbolize that two complementary angles make up a right angle. Now let's go a step further. Let's reverse it here. Let's say we got the measure of angle 2 is going to equal 80 degrees. We don't know the measure of angle 1. So we have the measure of angle 1 here. Now the measure of angle 2 is 80 degrees. We know that we do know that they're complementary angles, which would mean they add up to 90 degrees. But we don't know the measure of angle 1. Well, treat the measure of angle 1 as a variable. You'll subtract 80 from both sides. When you do that, you'll get the measure of angle 1 by itself. 90 minus 80, that's 10. So the measure of angle 1 would equal 10 degrees. And that's how you would get perfect complementary angles, when they both add up to 90. Alright, there is another type of angle. We are going to do next what's called supplementary angles. We will have supplementary angles. Now, supplementary angles are when you have two or more angles that add up to 180 degrees. This case, we'll just go with two angles. You could split complementary and supplementary into as many angles as you want. The sum of all of them for complementary should add up to 90. For supplementary, they should add up to 180. They should make a perfect straight line. Now, let's go ahead and draw ourselves a nice straight line to begin with here. Alright. Let's go ahead and draw a beautiful straight line. I'm sure it'll be anything but beautiful, but I do gotta try. I think that's good enough for the straight line component of it. Okay. We're only going to work off of two angles, but again, you could have 10 angles inside of here that add up to 180. As long as they all add up to 180, they're supplementary. But let's say here at the center, let's say one angle is 135 degrees. A bit of my drawing phase here. So we have two angles here. Let's say the first angle is 135 degrees. So the second angle, that would have to be, well, 45 degrees in order to be 180. if you want to find out what the value of an angle is, you just subtract it from 180, you'll get the other angle. So you have a 45-degree angle and a 135-degree angle. Together, they add up to 180 degrees. They're supplementary angles. Now, let's say I have the measure of the first angle being 150 degrees, right? I don't know the value of the second angle. I don't know what angle 2 is equal to. But again, I can do a small algebra problem. I know the measure of angle 1 is 150 degrees. But I don't know the measure of angle 2, so that'll be our variable. We know that these are supplementary angles, so they should add up to 180. If they add up to anything other than 180, they're not supplementary angles. They have to be equal to 180. Well, again, like we did with the complementary angles, you want to make that measure of that angle that you don't know, the variable, you want to isolate it by itself. So in order to do that, we'd have to subtract 150 from both sides. So if you subtract 150 from the first side, the left side, you'll just get the measure of angle 2 by itself. Then 180 minus 150, that's 30. So the missing angle that we don't know, the measure of angle 2, is equal to 30 degrees. That would be the supplement of 150 would be 30. That would cause 150 and 30 to add up to 180, therefore make them supplementary angles. Now let's do the opposite here. Let's say the first angle is equal to 15 degrees, but we don't know the measure of angle 1. I'm sorry. The second angle is equal to 15 degrees, but we don't know the measure of the first angle. Still, you're going to take the measure of the first angle plus the measure of the second angle, which in this case is 15 degrees. You're going to set them equal to 180 degrees. Now, of course, the measure of angle 1, that acts like a variable. We need to isolate that by itself. You'll have the measure of angle 1. You'll have to take 15 away from both sides to get the measure of angle 1 by itself. Of course, when you do that, measure of angle 1 by itself is what you'll have. 180 minus 15, that's 165. So we found the missing angle to make the supplementary to be 165 degrees. That'd be the measure of angle 1. So really, once again, with angles, all there is to it is knowing, okay, you have an angle smaller than 90. If it's smaller than 90, such as this angle, it's an acute angle. It's acute since the measure of the angle, we'll call this angle x, the measure of angle x is greater than 0 degrees, but the measure of the angle is less than 90 degrees. Therefore, this is an acute angle. So there is that. Remember, if you have a perfect 90-degree angle, we'll call this angle x again. If the measure of that angle is exactly equal to 90, it is a right angle. If let's say the measure of an angle, we'll call this angle x, the measure of that angle x is greater than 90 degrees, but the measure of that angle is less than 180, it is obtuse. That'll be an obtuse angle. And then last but not least, you have, if you just get a straight line, we'll call this angle X. When the measure of that angle equals exactly 180 degrees, you get a straight line, it's a straight angle. And then of course, you have complementary angles. You could do one angle, two angles, three angles, heck. You could do 10 angles if you wanted, but the point is the sum of all three angles should add up to 90 degrees if they're complementary angles. And then last but not least, we have supplementary angles, where again you could do several angles here to get 180 degrees, but the point is however many angles you have to have supplementary angles, they should all add up to 180 degrees. So that's really all there is for angles. The next lesson we will be discussing triangles, and we will be applying the knowledge of angles to triangles. So I hope everyone has a good night. Take care.